Happy Halloween, October 31st, 2020. And here are some inspirational stories from today's news. A story in the New York Times about a teenager who was like a whiz in bridge. I've always heard about playing bridge, the card game from Warren Buffett and Bill Gates always partner up. And it just seems like a cool game. I'm not much of a card player, but maybe I'll get into that game. There's a website, bridgebase.com, that you can go. And there's an app called Tricky Bridge that I guess is good for bridge. And they say that you can learn a lot of different skills, including compassion, emotional endurance, appreciation for the older generation, and people skills. It's a very intricate and strategic and intellectual game. And, with any great game, there's a lot of different levels that you can enjoy. So, pretty worthy encounter, I think, to check out Bridge. I cut out a picture of JFK and his wife Jackie at a fancy, well, this was a reading with Robert Frost, the poet, whom I like a lot. He has that quote about family. Home is where when you have to go there, they have to take you in. And also the author Pearl Buck. So this was I like JFK. The author from the series for kids, I Survived. Like I survived the Titanic, or I survived the Great Molasses Flood, which I've already mentioned I have a great interest in. I think that's just such an interesting tale. And that she sees her books as being really a lesson on resilience for kids, not depressing. She said that when researching the Great Molasses Flood, she had to read up on the Spanish flu. And she said John Barry's book called The Great Influenza has a tremendous amount of similarities to what we're going through now with COVID, that you could basically cut and paste a lot of the same things that are happening. A lot of resentment and all the things that are going on. Kids learning from home and churches closed. She encourages kids to keep track of their experiences and feelings. A great way would be journaling. And of course, I'm really into journaling as well. That's one exercise I always have my coaching clients do, is some journaling and see what's going on. An article about horror movies from the 60s on, all the classic movies from each decade. I'm always interested in that. An article from Wall Street Journal called With No Commute, Americans Worked More. Even without the commute that we usually have to do. How do we spend that time? More work. Whereas we could have spent more time reclaiming our hobbies and connecting with others. A lot of it was funneled into work and chores. From mid-March to mid-September, Americans spent 60 million fewer hours commuting. Interesting statistic. Another article about Dan Ariely, who has a segment in Wall Street Journal. I really like him. He talks about, it was a question about having kids only take one candy and the honor system and all that. And he suggested put a mirror in front of the bowl, and that helps people with their self-awareness. It gives them greater pressure to do the right thing when they can see themselves there. And also he gave a handy tip about goal setting, where give yourself a little slack. If you have a daily goal, it's fine to let one day during the week go. Here's a book that's out that I'd like to check out. Pictures from Navy SEALs training. Those guys are inspirational. What they can go through and what they learn of just how far you can go and how much of wimps we are. I think the worst part of my day is when I don't get the right cream cheese with my bagel in the morning. And these guys are going through what they do. So the book is called Uncommon Grit, a photographic journey through the eyes of a Navy SEAL. Peter Frampton has a book called Do You Feel Like I Do? Need to check that out. I always liked Peter Frampton. He made a big impression with his, classic Frampton Comes Alive album, which I was very young when I first heard it, but even his slower songs I really like. And that guy can play guitar. Here are three different writers and their recommendations for great detective stories. And a feature in the Wall Street Journal about the Sherlock Holmes series. And I like when these series talk about all the different elements within a book at that era. You know, what was the technology at that time? What was the design concepts? What was the fashion, the eating and drinking? And I've been wanting to get into that again. Sherlock Holmes. Well, not again. I've never gotten into it, but I would like to. Here's an article in the Globe, Boston Globe, about the Day of the Dead, the holiday from Mexico. And this is a celebration of life. And I always like that idea when you have a wake or a funeral, that it's more of a celebration of the person than dark and dreary, about the afterlife and not being afraid of it. And what they have is a ofrenda, which is an altar meant to honor deceased loved ones, and to have that altar for someone special. For a couple years, I've been interested in the Great Barrier Reef because it's so amazing. I guess it's the biggest, I don't know, the largest living organism in the world, I think. And it's pretty incredible. And they just discovered some new ancient, well, it's an ancient coral, but they just discovered it. Pretty interesting. An article in the New York Times about cheesy, schlocky horror movie hosts like Elvira and all those corny shows, which I like. And there was a cool interview in the Wall Street Journal with John Cleese, the Monty Python guy. And he was in the one I really like too, the Fish Called Wanda. And he's just written a book about creativity. It's called Creativity, A Short and Cheerful Guide by John Cleese. And I really need to get that because there's a whole bunch of points that I really found interesting from his interview about the book. He defines intelligence as the ability to know what's important and what's not. He says once when he was asked in high school to write an essay about time, he wrote the whole thing about how he didn't have any time to write it. And creativity, he talks about how creativity is unlearned from the time we're children and kind of beaten out of us, and that's a shame. He says that putting decisions off is a key part of his creative process. You have to learn how to play first. And that play is separate from ordinary life. Interesting. Talks about his desire to start up meditation in a serious daily thing, like a Buddhist approach. And his approach is, you know, like if you let a glass of cloudy water sit still, the cloudiness settles and it clears. But that takes time. You can't hurry it. And a book he found fascinating was called Hillbilly Elegy. A guy named J.D. Vance, who went to Harvard and studied his hillbilly family. Pretty interesting guy, John Cleese. So check out that book, Creativity, A Short and Cheerful Guide. Well, I hope you were inspired by a couple of those stories. I figure I go through this process anyway, so I might as well make a video of it and share it with you. Maybe some things are interesting, or just the approach to the news. Look for it as a way to, how can I help? How can I be helpful? And not just to be depressed by the news. You can select how you react to the news. If you want more information about my life coaching on the subjects of time management, personal productivity, living your life balance, then check out my website, allthehatswewear.com. And I also have a podcast there where you can hear. Thanks and have a great day.